America.
And for update and analysis of developments on the capture trial of former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, our special correspondent James Blue joins me now. Thank you, James. It's good to see you again. Well, it's no news that Nicolas Maduro and his wife are now at the detention center in New York City and slated to be housed in their own wing as of Saturday evening. However, what is now new is the conversation surrounding the trial and the legal battle ahead. So what are you hearing concerning this at the moment?
Well, I think that President Maduro and his wife will soon make a initial court appearance. And what that means is that they will show up in court and the US government will name the charges against them, and they will have a chance at that time to let us know whether they have attorneys. I think the Maduro defense is going to be quite robust. I think it's going to take many months to get through this trial. But I do think a fair trial is actually possible. This is the most high-profile court in the United States. It's the Southern District of New York, and it's where lots and lots of big cases have been held. This is, a court that has a practice and a tradition of handling these high-profile cases. And so we'll exactly see. President Trump mentioned that the case may actually go to Miami. Who knows if it goes to the federal court system there. But the initial thing is that the U.S. will give charges and announce charges to President Maduro and his wife in court. That's an open court. Anyone can attend. There will be no cameras because cameras are not allowed in federal court. And he will be treated like any other defendant. He will have access to lawyers, and if he cannot pay for a lawyer, the U.S. government will pay for his lawyer. And so he will kind of move into a much more regular and a much more traditional court proceeding.
And like you said, it's the highest high-profile case, as you mentioned earlier. But there's a question or debate, surrounding, the legality of his trial now. So, and of course, let's also look at this legality as it were. Some people have questioned that why this legality is something to debate about, especially when you look at the fact that this operation was launched without the approval of Congress. However, U.S. court have also previously ruled that how a defendant is brought before the court does not necessarily affect the court's power to try them. So, and this further suggests that the presidential authority could override international legal constraint. Let me ask you,
I don't think
how widely accepted is this position?
So, look, I don't think there is agreement, and there will not be agreement on the legality of his capture and sort of bringing him to the United States. Now that he's here, now that he has been arrested on the indictment that was outstanding, I think there is an argument that he is ready for trial. And I think if you were to interrogate the action that was taken, and you heard it, I saw you played a clip of Secretary Rubio from Meet the Press. Also in that interview, he talked about this being a U.S. law enforcement activity that was supported and aided by the U.S. Department of War. And so they are really framing this, they're shaping this as an action of the U.S. Justice Department. He's not in a military prison. He's not in a military jail. He's in the U.S. Department of Justice holding facility in New York City. And so they're really trying to show that this is just a common U.S. Justice Department activity. And even if you look at the badges of the men, and I think there's a woman who are carrying them in this picture. I think on his shoulder it says DEA. That's the Drug Enforcement Agency. Yes, he's at the DEA. You can see it on the carpet there. So this is a federal law enforcement activity that was supported and facilitated by the U.S. military. They were actively working to execute existing indictments that were issued for Maduro, and they just needed help in actually getting him and bringing him back to the US for this purpose. But I do believe that regardless of sort of what you think about that process of getting him to the US, that it's still possible to evaluate his ability to get a fair trial independent of your view on the legality of that capture and his sort of being delivered to the US courts via the US military.
No doubt, of course. I mean, well put together by Marco Rubio yesterday when he talked about, it's about law enforcement. But despite the focus on the law enforcement, Trump at the news conference said the United States would now participate in running Venezuela, at least temporarily. And in his word, he said that he aims to reclaim the oil, the land, and other assets that they previously stole from, U.S. Is this entirely about salvaging the economy, or there's more? Because if you look at reactions from around the world, Iran, Cuba, and quite a lot of, world leaders reacting to this operation.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is no way to try to question whether it's legal under international law. I think the rules of international law are very clear. At the same time, President Putin has sort of sustained the invasion of Ukraine for many, many, many months. We're going on 4 years, I think. And, he's still there. And so I think the international community is able to absorb some things and allow some things to happen regardless of their legality.
All right, let's also dig deep. I mean, Venezuela's Supreme Court, as we read earlier, has ordered on Saturday night that the Delcy Rodriguez will, of course, the vice president who assumed the presidency of Venezuela in acting capacity after Maduro was taken by the U.S. military to face charges in New York, as it were. But Rodriguez, being Maduro's hand-picked vice president and more like a loyalist, as described by many, have called for Maduro's capture. He described Maduro's capture as barbaric, illegal, and illegitimate kidnapping. He used so many words. However, but if you look at the interview that Defense Secretary had yesterday on CBS, Pete Hegseth, he said President Trump set the terms on running Venezuela. And that's confirming Trump's earlier statement that, America will run the country until there is a judicious transition. Help us paint a picture of how things will pan out going forward.
Yeah, I don't think we know how things are going to pan out. We don't know what it means to run a country without having troops on the ground. We do know that there were CIA operatives who were in Venezuela for a number of months. They were tracking President Maduro and finding out all the very specifics about what he ate, where he slept, what pets he used, and sort of the rotation he did between the safe houses that he has in Caracas. And so we just do not know what running the country actually means. I don't know if you can see it behind me. There's a picture of a Talib with a gun in Kabul. The U.S. tried to run Afghanistan. They failed horribly. The U.S. tried to run Iraq. They also failed horribly. And so I have had the good fortune of being in these places where you have had troops on the ground and things have gone absolutely pear-shaped. And so I don't really understand how it's possible to run a country, to control a country, to make sure that country's leader lives up to the very specific things that you're asking for. I don't know how you do that without more troops. This may be a completely new prototype of war, a completely new approach to war. And if it is, it's just not something I'm very familiar with. And it's not something that I really understand exactly how do you quote unquote win. But anyway, this is the situation the US finds itself in right now. And let's just sort of see what happens as they continue to work and do things inside Iraq.
Mm. Now, just before I allow you to go, I need you to address this thought. I mean, some thought are saying now he's talking about Delcy Rodriguez as the in acting capacity running the country at the moment. So do you think she'll be able to work with Donald Trump? Remember, Donald Trump says they are going to take over and run things until there's a judicious transition. And secondly, what happens to the opposition right now, led by Maria Machado?
Really good question. So first of all, we have no idea where Machado is. And we heard in the press conference yesterday that President Trump didn't think that she was in a position to actually lead the country. And so in a way, I think what the administration is doing is that they're picking the Maduro team and they're really trying to neutralize them by saying that you can stay in power, that we're going to support you, that you can get the gas money you need, that you can do all those things that they've been able to do under Maduro. By appointing this sort of figurehead, they have the opportunity to keep that going. Clearly, at some point, that well is going to run dry, and they're going to have to respond either militarily or with special forces. Who knows exactly? But the key thing to remember is they're trying to do this without any troops on the ground. That proved incredibly hard and, in fact, impossible in Iraq and Afghanistan, where there were no troops on the ground. So go figure, how is this going to work? We just don't know. And we don't really know what quote unquote run is. And, we do know that President Maduro was offered a chance to go to Turkey. He declined. And it was really shortly after that decline that he actually went into training. And actually, I'm sorry, it was after that decline that the U.S. actually launched the mission to kidnap him and bring him to justice in the United States.
James Blue, Rise Special Correspondent there. Thank you so much for your time. Well, you're still watching Rise America.
America.